Hey now Brawlers, today we're going to take a look at Imperial Settlers from Ignacy Trzewiczek in Portal Games. Now Ignacy will always be one of my favorite designers based solely on the fact that he designed Robinson Crusoe, Adventures on the Cursed Island, one of the best games I've ever played, a highly thematic, cooperative, Euro-style game that tells a story and that hates you. It hates you and it wants you to lose every time that you play. But I don't care because when you do win, it's just a fantastic experience. Imperial Settlers, however, is much closer in mechanical resemblance to some of his other designs, like 51st State and New Era, as far as trying to using Euro-style mechanics to build a civilization, gain resources, and use them to acquire victory points. And you are trying to build a civilization, but don't think of it in terms of like Eclipse or Twilight Imperium or Sid Meier's Civilization or Nations, any of those big sprawling games with lots of cardboard and tons of tokens and dice and going to war with your neighbors and building technology trees. There's not a ton of that in this game. This is a card-driven game, so most of what you're doing on the board is just laying out cards representing all of your locations, trying to build your civilization. That way, you represent all these different factions like the Japanese and the Egyptians going throughout history, and again, you're just trying to score victory points by the end of a certain amount of time. So it seems much simpler than those other games, and it seems like it's much faster than those other games. But does that mean that it lacks depth? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at the game, then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final opinion. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Imperial Settlers. This is a competitive game for 2 to 4 players where the goal is to build out your empire and gain as many victory points as possible by the end of 5 rounds. Now, they do include a solo variant that uses these attack cards here, where basically you're playing against a virtual player. Your goal is still the same, get the most victory points at the end of 5 rounds by beating the virtual player, but it's going to be impeding you by attacking you and raising your locations. I didn't play the solo game, I'm not really interested in it, but it is there for you to use if you do want to try the solo game, so that's a very cool thing. Now, in a normal multiplayer game, each player is going to choose a faction. There's Romans, Egyptians, Barbarians, and the Japanese. You'll take your little faction board here. Well, not little, but the long faction board. You'll also get your own deck of faction cards with different colors. You'll put your little scoring marker on the scoring board. And there's also a common deck of faction cards that you may be able to draw from. Every card in the game, whether it's one of the common cards or the faction cards, represents a location. But what you do with it can vary. You have some different options. So let's go ahead and take a look at the player board. Each player's player board is mostly the same, but there are some differences. So for instance, at the top of each board, you have the production. This is what you're going to produce at the production phase of every round. And this will be different for every player faction. So the Japanese produce 4 workers, 1 raise token, 1 shield token, and 1 wood, while the Egyptians only produce 3 workers, 1 raise token, 1 shield, and a gold coin. In the middle, each faction has a different feature, and it's usually the ability to store different items or different resources. Resources usually get wiped out if you haven't spent them at the end of every round in the cleanup phase, but for instance, the Japanese can store any number of produce. They don't have to worry about that. Then at the bottom is a little reminder of an action you can take during the action phase that lets you use 2 workers to exchange them for a wood, a stone, a produce, or another card from one of the decks. Usually anytime that you are allowed to draw a card from one of the decks, you can choose which deck you draw from, your own personal faction deck or the common deck. And this can be used multiple times. For every 2 workers you spend with an action, you can swap that out. I should also point out a couple things with the artwork here. First off, you see that there are little roads going off of each side. That's very important for how you place cards in the game. Whenever you build common locations, they're going to go on the right side of your board. Whenever you build faction locations, they're going to go on the left side of the board. And it all depends whether they're production, feature, or action cards. The cards will indicate which side they go on, and you're going to put them in the appropriate spot so that all the roads should connect, so you have sort of a cool thematic thing going on. Also, Ignacy likes to make it so that both sides of your player boards have a male and female side, so whichever side you prefer to use, you have that option, but it doesn't change anything mechanically speaking. So once you have your player board, once you have your faction deck, and you have a hand of cards, then the game is going to begin. The easiest way for me to tell you how to play the game is just to go through the different phases. So the first phase is the lookout phase. So you already have some cards in your deck, but now you're going to go through sort of a card drafting phase in order to get more cards to work with. Everyone starts off by drawing another card from their faction deck, and then Depending on the number of players plus 1, you're going to put out that many cards face up from the faction deck. So let's say that this was a 4-player game, you would put out 5 cards. And starting with the first player, who gets the first player marker, you're going to go in clockwise order, drafting one of the cards from the stock. So everyone's going to get 1 card, then there'll be 1 card left over that gets immediately discarded. Then you're going to do all of this all over again. You'll put out, in this case, 5 brand new cards, depending on the number of players, but this time go in counterclockwise order. So the last player now gets to pick first, goes all the way back around to the first player. So you'll get 1 extra faction card and 2 cards from the common deck before the start of each round. Then you're going to go into the production phase. The production phase is where you're actually going to get the goods that are detailed on your production board, along with, I didn't mention this before, there's a spot up here at the top of your board for deals, which I'll get to in a minute. You'll get anything that your deals produce, along with any special locations you've built that also produce stuff, and you'll take the appropriate resources. So, just as to show you the components here, you have stone, you have wood, you have workers, which, as I mentioned, can be used for a variety of things. You have produce, which seems kind of difficult to get in the beginning of the game, depending on the cards that you draw. You have raise tokens, which are going to be used to destroy either cards from your own hand in order to get resources, or potentially your opponent's locations, after they're already built. And you have defense tokens, which can actually protect your locations. You also have gold, which can be a little more difficult to get because gold can be used as a substitute for wood, stone, or produce, but not the other way around. And also, none of the components are considered to be finite. If you need to, you can use these multipliers of ×5 to indicate that you have more of a given resource. So once you've produced everything you're going to produce, put it either on or near your player board, indicating that you have them. Then you're going to go into the meat of the game, which is the action phase. Starting from the first player, you're going to go around and take 1 action on your turn. You only get 1 action per your turn, but it's going to keep going around until you pass. When you pass, you're not allowed to take any more actions for the round. You just get to sit there and watch the other players potentially take more actions. But as long as you can do stuff, you can keep taking actions. So the different types of actions you can do: build a location. So every location, whether it's a faction location or a common location, can be built and turned into a location. Up in the top left corner, it will tell you what resources you need to spend in order to build. In this case, this one would be 2 produce. If you can build this is an action road, so you spend those 2 fruit, and you're able to, because it's a common card, it'll go on the right side of your board, and it's an action card, so it'll go down there on that spot. Congratulations, you've built a location. Now, some of the faction cards have a little bit of a steeper cost. So let's take a look at this Egyptian card here. This one says that in addition to spending, in addition to spending a stone, you're also going to have to spend another location. What that means is that another location that you've already built in your empire, whether it's common or faction, is going to have to get discarded and put back in the discard pile in order for you to build this card. So that can be a little more difficult, but it might be a more powerful card, and it might be worth it for you to do that. Let's take a look at some of the other common aspects of these cards. So up in the other corner of the card, we have raise to gain. What this means is that you can spend 1 of your raise tokens, which are the little sword tokens, in order to discard this card and gain the appropriate resources. This could be any of the common resources like wood and stone. It could also be coins. It could also be victory points. Anytime you see a star is victory points. Then you have the name of the card, and also each card is location that you've successfully built is going to be worth a victory point as well. The common cards are worth from the common deck are worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. The faction cards are going to be worth 2 victory points, as well as any bonus victory points they may grant you down in the text. Then in the text, it will tell you what this card does. So this is one of the production cards. This one produces 2 wood. You get to actually get this production as soon as you've built it, and you'll put it up in one of the production spots of your player board. So that's the general stuff that comes on the common faction cards. Now, the common cards, I should say, not common faction, but common cards. The faction cards have one extra little bit that the common cards do not have, and that is the ability to make a deal with them. This is another action that you can take on your turn. I'll call this the second type of action you can take. When you choose to make a deal, first off, no matter what the deal is, you have to spend 1 produce in order to make that deal. It represents you trading to make the deal. Then you're going to shove this card underneath the top of your board on the spot that says deal, where it's blue up here, so only the type of resources depicted on the deal can be visible. And what that means is that as soon as you build it, and then on every production round thereafter, you're going to gain that particular resource. So in this case, if I made a deal, I would be able to gain a stone as soon as I build it, and on every production phase thereafter. So making a deal is a good way for you to build your engine and get more and more stuff going on. The next type of action you could take, and I already described this a little bit, was raise. You can spend 1 raise token to raise a card from your hand and get the resources, or you could spend 2 raise tokens to raise another opponent's location that they've already built. Now, this is where one of the there's an important distinction with one of the factions. Now, almost all the cards in the game that can be raised are common cards. And for 3 of the factions, the Barbarians, the Romans, and Egyptians, those are the only cards of theirs that you can raise. So if the Egyptians over here had built this card, I could spend 2 raise tokens to go over there, destroy it, and I'll immediately gain those raise bonuses. Remember, it's 2 swords for your opponent's cards, 1 sword for cards from your hand. And you can't raise your own cards. But I think. I don't know why you would. But the Japanese are a little bit different. All of the Japanese faction cards have the raise symbol in the corner, which means that they can all be raised, either from their own hands or if another opponent wants to destroy them. They have 1 extra secret bonus, though, that can kind of balance that out. And that's that they can take their workers that they have for that round and at any point during their turn automatically make them into a samurai that is guarding any of their locations. That makes them 1 raise token more difficult to destroy. So that means that if a samurai is guarding, it would take 3 raise tokens in order to destroy it. And that's also where I'll mention the shield tokens as well. I think every faction gets at least 1 shield token, potentially. The Barbarians, I don't think get that. But no matter how you get the shield tokens, at any point during your turn, you can choose to put your shield token on 1, or whatever shield tokens you have, on your locations. 1 shield per location, I believe. In that case, it functions just like the samurai does. It protects that location and makes it 1 more difficult in order to raise it. So you could double that up with the samurai, but you're only limited to 1 samurai per card, and still make it really hard for someone to destroy that particular location. So raising a location is another type of action that you can do. Then you can activate an action location. So I mentioned that some of these locations have actions on them. It's always clearly delineated. It'll say action down here, and then it'll have some sort of different thing that you can do. So you'll spend an action. You can use that card. You can only use every action card once per round unless it says otherwise. So this one says spend a worker and 1 sword raise token to gain a victory point. This one here says you can spend 1 worker and 1 produce to gain 2 victory points. Those are just some examples. You can some of them allow you to activate them twice. So the castle says you can spend 1 worker to draw 1 card, and this can be activated twice, but you have to do it at the same time. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess you could do it separately if you wanted to. Then another type of action you can do is you can spend 2 workers to get a resource or a card from the deck, and that's that last thing that's indicated on the bottom of your faction board here that every player can do. Now, once you've got done with the action phase, then you're going to go to the cleanup phase. The cleanup phase is where you discard all the used and unused resources that you've used during the turn, workers, your gold, your different resource tokens. If you have your samurai will stay out there if you're the Japanese faction. If you're able to store things on the feature part of your board, those will stay as well. Everything else gets wiped out. You carry over the cards that you have in hand, and then you're going to go to the next round, starting with the lookout phase. And that's really the game. You're going to keep going through all these different phases over and over again, trying to build out your empire, get resources, get new cards, get victory points from the cards that you have. Anytime that you spontaneously gain victory points, you'll move yourself up on the track and try to be the one with the most points at the end of 5 rounds. I will show you some of the different cards that come in the game from the common deck and from the faction, just to give you a taste of what you can expect. So let's take a look at some of these common cards first. You have the village, and I'm sorry if you can't really make this out. I'm trying my best, but I'll describe it to you. The village here pays 1. It's 1 wood. You can raise it for 2 workers. This is an example of a good production card. Produces 1 worker. Anytime it says building bonus, that's an additional bonus you get when you build it. So the first time you build this, you actually get 2 workers. And then from then on, if you still have it out in your empire, you'll always produce a worker during the production phase. Here's another example. This one is for stone, the quarry. That's going to give you stone during the production phase. This is a cool one. The monument gives you a victory point every single production phase, which really, when you think about it, that's only 5 victory points plus 1, potentially 5 if you build it off at the start of the game, but it's still 5 victory points. It's not too bad. The wood storage. Now, this is one of the feature cards, which means that you put it in the feature section of your board, and its effect will always kick off when it applies. So, in this case, make this a little sharper. The building bonus is 1 star for each brown location in your empire, and additionally, you get to draw a card. So that's the only. So in this case, you only get that bonus 1 time. And here's an action card from the common deck. You can spend a wood to gain 1 victory point, maybe activate it twice. Here's some of the Egyptian cards I thought were pretty interesting. The Slaves, which is also pretty offensive. You can use an action to spend 1 worker to gain 2 stones and 1 victory point, and you can make a deal with it to get a stone. The Sanctuary. Action, you can spend 1 worker to choose a card from hand and place it in your empire as a foundation. Anytime that a card is a foundation, which is also, that's also what happens when you raise a card as well. It gets turned into a foundation, which it still counts as a location, but it doesn't do much for you. But you could always discard it if a card requires you to discard a location to build it. But this one lets you take a card, make it into a foundation, and gain a stone instead of wood. Additionally, you gain a victory point. Yeah, when you raise a location, it goes down as a foundation, and you gain a wood as sort of a recompense for that. Temple of Ra. Action, choose an enemy location and mark it with the Egypt's token, which are these things here, which are unique to the Egyptians, obviously. Mark it with an Egypt token. For the rest of the round, the marked location is treated as your own. And the Sphinx, of course. Feature, each time you gain at least 2 victory points, you gain 1 victory point more. I saw a couple of people use that to great effect, once ending in victory. Here's some cool Japanese cards. You have the Ninjas. Action, you can spend a worker to choose 1 enemy deal, discard it, and immediately gains the goods that it provides. This is a very mean card. Also, building bonus, you need to get 2 samurai to place as you see fit. You have the Shrine. This is one of the cool victory point cards for the Japanese faction. At any time during your turn, place any number of resources on the shrine for the rest of the game. At the end of the game, you gain a number of victory points based on the resources that you put there. Very, very cool. Trade route. As an action, you can spend a produce to choose 1 enemy faction location and make a deal with it. Draw a card from the Japanese deck and place it face down under the location to indicate the deal. Very, very cool card. I love that one. The Geisha House, of course. You can production, gain a worker for each pink card in your empire. There's little colors of the faction cards over here, to a max of 3. And here's some Roman cards. The Warehouses. Feature, you may store any number of wood, stone, and produce in your faction storage. That's pretty cool. The Legion. Production, you get 1 card from the common deck. This is one of those instances where it specifically says what deck you have to get the card from. Building bonus, 1 common card. The Colossus. Action, spend 1 worker and 3 stone to gain 4 victory points. It's expensive, but that's a lot of points. And finally, for the Romans, the Spies. Action, spend a worker to take 1 enemy deal and add it to your own deals. Additionally, you gain a victory point. That's so nasty. Alright, and finally, we'll take a look at the Barbarian cards. The Temple. It's a feature card, but really it just gives you a building bonus of 4 victory points. The Dark Chapel. Action, spend a raise token. Spend either 1 raise token or 2 raise tokens to immediately raise a card from your hand or an enemy location. Discard any number of the goods you receive to gain 2 victory points for each good. You have the Saboteurs. Action, spend 1 worker to take 1 resource from 1 enemy. That's nasty. And finally, Raid. As you can tell, they are very action attack oriented. Feature, each time you raise, gain 1 victory point. So that's just some of the different cards that come in the deck. Each deck has a lot of cards, a lot of unique things that you can do with each faction. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. So, based on the designer, based on the charming artwork, based on other reviews that I had already heard and read and saw about the game, I knew that I would like this to some degree and that it would be at least a decent game. But people, I am telling you, I am shocked by how much I enjoyed this game. I really, really love this game. After just a few plays, it's just a fantastic game. And that's the thing, too. Because oftentimes, I will play a game, because it's the nature of a board game reviewer, is that in order to be competitive, you have to play a ton of games, and you have to push out a ton of hot reviews. And even if I like a game, even if I can say that it is a good game, if I have played it enough to review it, it's probably going on my shelf, and it won't get played for quite a while. I played this game a couple of times, enough that, I mean, it's not a very, very complex game. So after a couple of plays, I pretty much had in mind that I really enjoyed it and that I could talk about the mechanics at length. Even then, I said, I want to play it again. Let's play it again. I got together with my crew and we played it again. That's how much I enjoyed it. It's almost like I was using having to play it for review as an excuse to play it again. That's how much I enjoyed it. And it's tough for me to describe. Well, here's the thing. I mentioned this in I mentioned this in my Impulse review as well, that as the more and more games that I play, as I'm evolving as a hardcore board gamer, I'm noticing that the games that I tend to gravitate towards are games that are card driven. We're managing cards either through hand management or drafting or deck building, whatever it might be. Those are the types of games that I'm gravitating towards and I have the most interest in and that I could be the most competitive in. And that is the main mechanism of Imperial Settlers. Not deck building or anything, but just, managing your hand of cards, using them for different things. I love that idea. Using your hand and using the cards that you have for multiple different things. Do you raise it? Do you make a deal with it? Do you build it? You have different options here. The game is actually relatively simple. Even if, like, the very first time we played this, I was in a hurry and I didn't actually read most of the rules ahead of time. I just grabbed a couple people and was like, look, I got to play this game, okay? I don't know what it's like. Let's just try to get through the rules as quickly as possible. And we got it up and running in like less than a half hour, which is great. I mean, it really is for any game. And once we were through the first round, it's totally intuitive how to work it out, even if you have very little experience with Euro-style games or any kind of card-driven game. It just comes very, very naturally. The rules are simple, but at the same time, I would not call this a simple game, mechanically speaking, because you have a variety of options and paths to victory. Another thing that I love in any game. And also it changes depending on what faction that you have. So do you want to go for trying to get, you can, right off the bat, you can just go for trying to get as much of your production resources going and making sure that you have tons and tons of resources in the first couple of rounds. But at the same time, other players might be doing riskier things like, raising a bunch of cards in order to get resources that way, making a lot of deals for long-term benefits. At the same time, you have these different combos that you might be able to work off to, like the feature cards. Do you want to focus on a particular type of card going out into your area? Like let's say, like the first time I played, I was a Japanese, and I decided to focus mid-game on getting red cards as much as possible because I had a feature card that worked well with those and gave me increasing bonuses. There's tons of decisions that you can make. How you can go for just trying to raise other opponents' stuff. If you want to go in that route, the Romans are very good at that. It's just being warlike and destroying other people's properties and getting resources that way. And, do you focus on your faction deck? Do you focus on the common deck? These are all different things that you can do. So while the game is very simple to learn, easy to learn, I should say, I would say that there is a definite strategy here and that you can get much, much better at it as you play over time. Like the first group of gamers that I played with, I won, but we were all new to it. So I was proud that I'd won, but I felt like any of us could have won on the second game. And sure enough, I played with a second group of people who had already played the game before, and I was crushed, just crushed. But I still loved the game because I knew that I could do better. So that's, it all works together very, very well in promoting that kind of strategic thinking and getting better over time while not being overwhelming with a ton of rules. I like the graphic design of the game. I really like the charming artwork. I like that everything is laid out very simply and very easy to understand. And that I like even the fact that it's not a huge deal, but as you lay out the different cards, the roads connect them. They go on very specific spots on your board, and it all connects together. I wouldn't call this the most thematic game in the world. And I thought about this before while I was playing. I don't think that I felt like I was building a big, sprawling civilization, but I did feel like I was building. That seems kind of like a weird distinction, but the fact is that even though I didn't feel like it was like I said, an epic 4X game or an epic nation-building game, I still felt like I was working my way up to something. Like I was building this engine, and it was coming out on the board through this cool-looking artwork and graphic design, which it all worked together really, really well. I don't know. It's tough for me to put into words, but I just really, really enjoyed this, and I enjoyed the fact that while we were playing our first game, it took way longer than it probably should have. I would say that if you know what you're doing with a group of gamers, even if you have a max player count, you can easily knock this out in an hour to 90 minutes, which is great. For our first game, it probably took closer to 2 hours, even with just 3 players. But while I was playing, didn't even notice. Even when it wasn't when it was someone else's turn. You know, when you're going around the action phase, taking your actions, I was just like, what are you doing? Okay, I'm ready. So I never felt bored. And none of the other players that I played it with in any of our games did either. Everyone really enjoyed this. I have not tried the solo mode yet, I'll admit that. And I don't know. I think that it probably works well, but it's just not something that I'm really eager to do unless I really have no other option, because a lot of the fun of this game is the interaction with other players. There's not a ton of interaction, but with those raising tokens and with raising tokens, raise tokens, and along with some of the particular faction cards that allow you to manipulate other players' cards, like the Japanese have a card that lets them make a deal with other players' cards, things like that, you really do have to pay attention to what other people are doing, because it's a tight game. That's another thing that I like. Every game that I've played has been really tight, less than 10 points. I don't know if that's a common thing for every game of this or was peculiar to our games, but it felt really, really good. I really enjoyed, whether I won or lost, I enjoyed the fact that it was a tight game like that. Now, one thing that I read on boards about a lot of different reviews about this game is that the Japanese can be overpowered. Now, I felt that in my first game. I played as the Japanese the first time because I wanted to see how true that was, and I did win. But in other games where someone else has played as the Japanese, I tried to play every faction that I could. It wasn't, they lost, actually. I don't think the Japanese won another game that we played. So it's tough to say. I think that you need to worry about the Japanese. You need to worry more about, they should be the focus of trying to raise, if you're going to raise an opponent's buildings or locations, you should go for theirs if anyone else's, if only because it's going to give you the most benefit anyways. But I think that's another balancing factor of the game. If you're worried about them being overpowered, do something about it. That's where the player interaction comes in. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. All in all, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here. This is a great game. This is the type of Euro game that I love. And I hope that I can't wait to play more and more of the different expansions that will inevitably be coming out for this game. There may be a replayability issue here if you play this game like 10 to 15 times and you've seen all the different cards, but with all the expansions that are inevitably coming out to add new factions, possibly more cards into the existing faction decks, I'm not worried about it. I'm really not worried about it. I'm looking forward to my next play of it, and for a board game reviewer willing to play a game they've already played again and again and again very quickly, that to me seems like the highest praise possible. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day in every way. Take care.